My brother tried to steal $800 from my savings card. That's how I found out he'd already gambled away the emergency cash our parents left us. I thought the worst part was waking up to fraud alerts and realizing my brother had tried to use my savings card. It wasn't. The worst part was finding out he had already emptied the emergency cash our parents left behind after they died. And even that still wasn't the part that messed me up the most. My parents died 2 years ago. I still hate typing that because it makes it sound clean and simple, and nothing about that time was clean or simple. It was hospital calls, forms, funeral decisions, casseroles from neighbors, people saying, "Let me know if you need anything," and then disappearing back into their own lives while mine felt like it had been hit by a truck. They didn't leave behind some huge inheritance. There was no life-changing payout, no surprise account, no miracle safety net. What they left was the house, a bunch of paperwork, some personal stuff, and one envelope of emergency cash my dad kept hidden in the hall closet behind an old file box. He used to call it the break glass fund. That was very him. He believed in backup plans, backup batteries, backup flashlights, backup keys. My mom used to tease him about it, but when something actually went wrong, she was always the first one asking where he kept the extra whatever. So, yes, there was cash in the house. Not some crazy amount, but enough to matter. About 10 grand. Enough that if life went sideways, it could keep one of us afloat for a while. After my parents died, my brother Ryan and I both knew it was there. We never really had a formal talk about it. We probably should have, but grief makes people avoid obvious conversations. Saying things out loud makes them real in a way that's hard to deal with when you're already barely holding it together. So it just stayed there, kind of silently understood as money you don't touch unless things are truly bad. At least that's what I thought. At the time this happened, I was 33 and trying to move to another city. Nothing glamorous. I wasn't trying to reinvent myself or run off and become some whole new person. I just wanted out. New apartment. Better job options. Fewer memories attached to every grocery store and traffic light. I'd been saving for it quietly. Part of that money was on a separate savings card I barely used. I didn't keep it in my wallet. It stayed in a leather holder in my room with my passport and a few documents because that money had a job. It wasn't for everyday stuff. It was for the move, for emergencies, for my future. Ryan knew that. And Ryan had a gambling problem. Not in the casual, he makes dumb sports bets way. I mean a real one. The kind that changes the whole mood of a house. The kind where every conversation about money feels loaded. The kind where someone starts acting like every problem is temporary if they can just get their hands on enough cash to turn things around. He already had history. His ex-wife kicked him out after she found out he'd used her card without permission. Before that, cash had gone missing from my dad's wallet more than once. Never enough to trigger a full explosion, just enough to make everyone uncomfortable. And every time there was some explanation that let the family move on. Dad forgot. Mom moved it. Ryan borrowed it and forgot to mention it. Whatever was easiest to live with. Families get really good at choosing the explanation that lets everyone go to bed. A few days before I found the charges, Ryan asked me if I still had money on my backup card. That's exactly how he said it. Not my savings card. Not the card I kept in my room. Not the card I was using for the move. My backup card. We were in the kitchen. He was doing that fake, casual thing people do when they're pretending not to ask for money while obviously asking for money. He said he was short, just needed a little help getting through the week and could pay me back Friday. I lied and said there wasn't much on it. Then I said no anyway. He didn't argue. That should have scared me more than it did. Usually there was some reaction. Guilt, irritation, self-pity. A whole little speech about how I always assume the worst or how family is supposed to help each other. This time he just said, "Okay," and walked away. At the time I actually thought maybe that was a good sign. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he finally got that he couldn't keep doing this forever. Nope. He'd just already moved on from asking. The morning it happened, my phone started buzzing on my nightstand before I was even fully awake. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I opened my bank app. Three charges: $250, $300, $250, all within minutes. I sat straight up in bed. The charges weren't random stores or some weird overseas merchant. They were sportsbook sites, multiple ones. I locked the card immediately. My hands were shaking enough that I messed up my password the first time. Then I called the bank. The woman I talked to was calm, which honestly made me feel crazier. She told me the payments had been made online using the correct card number, expiration date, and CVV. No big breach they could see. No sign my whole account had been hacked. Somebody had the actual card information. I remember staring at the wall while she talked and doing that stupid last round of denial in my head. Maybe it wasn't Ryan. Maybe some site had been compromised. Maybe I'd used the card somewhere and forgotten. Maybe. Then I remembered him asking if I still had money on that card. And I knew. I went to my room and pulled the leather holder out. The card was there. That actually threw me for half a second. Then I noticed it was turned the wrong way in the sleeve. That sounds tiny, but when it's your own stuff, I always put it back the same way. Now it was facing the opposite direction. That made me feel sicker than the actual missing $800. Because it meant he had come into my room, taken the card out, copied the information, and put it back. Carefully. Not in a panic. Not sloppily. Carefully. That's the part that got under my skin. It wasn't just theft. It was how calm it was. I called him right away. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I texted, "Did you use my card?" Nothing. By the time he got home around noon, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the bank app open and a page of notes next to me because apparently when I panic, I become somebody's aunt getting ready for court. He walked in, saw my face, saw my phone, and I could tell immediately he knew. "Did you take my card out of my room?" I asked. "No." Immediate. Not confused. Not offended. Just no. I turned the phone so he could see the charges. "These are sportsbook sites." He sat down slowly and rubbed his face. Then he said, "I was going to put it back." That sentence still makes me angry. Because people really do say stuff like that like it changes anything. Like having a fantasy version of the future where you fix the damage means the damage somehow doesn't count. "You already stole it," I said. "I just needed a little to get moving again." Get moving where? He didn't answer that. Instead, he launched into gambler logic. If one bet had hit, he could have replaced it before I noticed. He wasn't trying to take from me permanently. He just needed a little room to breathe. He was close to getting back on track. And the worst part was, he sounded like he believed himself. That's when I asked him if he had touched the emergency envelope. He froze. Just for a second. But I saw it. I didn't even wait for an answer. I got up, went to the hall closet, moved the old file box, and pulled the envelope out. It felt too light. I opened it. Empty. No cash. Nothing. I just stood there for a second staring into an empty envelope like it was going to explain itself. Then I walked back into the kitchen and dropped it on the table in front of him. "How much?" I asked. He mumbled something. I asked again. "About 10, he said. $10,000? Gone. Not all at once, obviously. That somehow made it worse. It meant he'd been taking from it for a while. Quietly. A little at a time. Long enough to feel safe. Long enough to assume no one would check. And he was right. I hadn't checked. Because it was the emergency fund. Because it felt wrong to mess with it. Because part of me wanted there to still be one untouched thing left in that house. I said, "You stole everything they left." And he actually said, "I was going to put that back too." That was the moment my anger turned into something colder. Because he really lived inside that logic. As long as he could picture some future where he fixed it, he didn't have to fully face what he was doing now. He said he only took a little at first. He said he thought he'd win it back. He said it got out of control faster than he expected. And honestly, I believe that part. I don't think he woke up one day with some master plan to rob the house blind. I think he crossed one line, didn't get caught, crossed another, didn't get caught, and by the time he'd emptied that envelope, he was still using the same excuses he'd used at the beginning. I should have called the police. I know that. People always say that when they hear stories like this, and they're not wrong. I could have filed a report, documented the charges, documented what I knew about the cash, and let consequences happen. A smarter version of me probably would have. But my parents were dead. Ryan was the only immediate family I had left, and I couldn't make myself be the person who fully finished blowing up what little was left of our family. That sounds pathetic now. Maybe it was. But grief makes you do sentimental, stupid things. I kept thinking if I cut him off completely right then, that was it. No parents to step in, no older relative to take over, no version of reality where someone else handled it, and I just got to be the sister. So instead, I made the mistake that really cost me. I tried to save him. At the time, it felt complicated and serious, not stupid. Like if I didn't at least try, I'd regret it forever. Like maybe this was rock bottom, and maybe, now that everything was exposed, something honest could finally happen. I told myself he was sick. I told myself our parents wouldn't want me to throw him away. I told myself if I didn't step in, he'd get even worse. Mostly, I think I was just trying to find some version of this where I hadn't lost both my parents and my brother. So I put my own life on hold. I stopped apartment hunting. I pushed back interviews. I picked up extra work because now I was trying to hold the house together and make up for money that was gone. I found an addiction counselor. I found a recovery program. I filled out forms he should have filled out himself. I drove him to appointments. I sat in parking lots waiting for him. I changed passwords and moved documents and checked my credit and basically turned into part sister, part case manager, part security system. And the sick part is that for a little while, it looked like maybe it was helping. That's how these situations trap you. If someone stays awful the whole time, leaving is easier. Ryan got better just enough to keep me hoping. He was calmer. He wasn't glued to his phone every second. He started eating like a normal person again. He helped with little things around the house. He apologized a few times, quietly, which honestly got to me more than if he'd been dramatic about it. One night I was doing dishes and he said, "I know you didn't have to do any of this." And I hate admitting how much that got to me. Because it sounded real. Because I wanted it to be real. Because once you've already lost so much, even a tiny sign that maybe something can still be saved feels bigger than it should. That was the real trap, not the theft. Hope. About 2 months into all of this, I got a call from the recovery program. The woman on the phone asked if everything was okay because Ryan hadn't shown up in weeks. I honestly thought she had the wrong person. He had meetings twice a week. He left the house for them. He came back with signed attendance slips. I told her there had to be a mistake. She checked again. No mistake. He hadn't been going. I remember sitting there after I hung up, just staring at my desk. My coffee was cold. I had an email open from an apartment listing I'd never answered. One of my pens had leaked blue ink onto my thumb. Then I got in my car and drove home. Ryan was in his room. The door was half closed. I pushed it open. Laptop on the desk. A live game on one side of the screen. A betting site on the other. Printed attendance slips next to it. I picked one up. Same pen. Same handwriting. His. He'd filled them out himself. And right next to those fake slips was a pawn ticket. For my dad's watch. My dad had one watch he really cared about. Not because it was insanely expensive. It was just his watch. The one he wore to weddings, funerals, holidays, anything important. Ryan used to say he wanted it because it reminded him of Dad. Apparently, it reminded him of money. He started talking before I even said anything. That's how I knew there wasn't some hidden bottom I just had to wait for him to hit. No silence, no shame. Just instant explanation. He was going to get it back. The loan wasn't that much. He almost won enough twice. He didn't want to tell me because he didn't want to stress me out. That line did something weird to me. I didn't explode, I just went cold. Didn't want to stress me out, as if the last 2 months of my life hadn't already been built around his mess. That was when it finally landed all the way. The empty envelope had been awful. The $800 had been awful. But what really broke something in me was realizing how much time I had handed over after that. Time I could have spent moving, working, sleeping, grieving, living my own life. He didn't just steal money, he took over my life. And the ugliest part is that for a while, I helped him do it. I said, "You stole from me twice." He looked at me like he didn't understand. "First the money," I said, "then the time." And instead of finally shutting up and feeling ashamed, he got defensive. That was what cured me. He said I knew he had a problem. He said I was acting like this was a choice. He said if I walked away now after everything and something happened to him, that would partly be on me. That would have worked on me earlier. Not then. Standing there with forged attendance slips and a pawn ticket for my dad's watch in front of me, something in me just flattened out. Not dramatically, just done. I finally understood I wasn't helping him get better. I was making his crashes softer. That's not the same thing, so I stopped. No huge screaming match, no dramatic speech. I just told him I was done paying, done arranging, done checking, done listening to promises that expired the second money showed up. If he wanted help, he could go get it himself. If he wanted to keep gambling, he could do it without using my life as padding. He cried then. That would have wrecked me earlier. It didn't anymore. Maybe that sounds cold. It didn't feel cold. It felt like finally getting feeling back in something that had gone numb. I moved out the next week. Not the way I planned. Not with the same money. Not with the same excitement. Everything cost more because it was rushed now. The place I got was smaller than what I'd wanted before. The whole move happened later than it should have. I had to rebuild the plan from worse ground, but I still went. The emergency cash never came back. My $800 didn't come back either. My dad's watch was gone. Ryan texted for a while after I left. First, the long, guilty messages. Shame, regret, how I was the only person he had left, how he knew he'd ruined everything, how he was trying. Then shorter ones. Then weirdly normal ones. Stuff like, "Did you take my extra charger?" Or, "Do you know where my gray hoodie is?" Or, "Hope the new place is okay." That part bothered me more than the dramatic messages, because it showed me how normal this had all become to him. He could sit in the middle of this whole disaster and still act like maybe enough time would flatten it into just another rough patch. I never answered, not because I stopped loving him. That would have been easier. I stopped answering because I finally understood that loving him and destroying myself for him had gotten way too tangled together in my head. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. People like simple stories. One bad sibling. One good sibling. Clean lesson. Clean ending. That's not what this felt like. Ryan wasn't a movie villain. He could be funny. He could be thoughtful. There were real parts of him I loved, which honestly made all of this worse. If he'd been awful every second of every day, there would have been less to grieve. And I wasn't some saint. I made excuses. I avoided obvious conclusions. I let grief, guilt, and fear of being alone turn me into the kind of person who thought, "I can fix this if I just try harder," was noble instead of dangerous. That's the part I'm still angriest about. Not just what he did, what I let happen after I knew. I think about that emergency envelope a lot. About my dad hiding it in the closet like planning ahead could soften whatever disaster came next. About how neither of my parents could have known the real emergency wasn't going to come from outside the house. It was already in it. Quietly. For a long time. The hardest part, if I'm being honest, isn't even saying my brother stole from me. It's admitting how much more I gave him after that because I wanted so badly not to lose the last family I had. I spent a long time thinking the biggest thing he stole was the emergency money our parents left behind. It wasn't. The bigger thing was how much of my life I handed over trying to save somebody who was getting better at lying to me the whole time. After my parents died, there was one emergency fund left in that house. For a long time, I thought that was the first thing my brother gambled away. It wasn't. The next thing he almost took was me.